Hello, I'm Bruce Lane from GTI Energy. I'm the Executive Director and CEO. GTI has In-Situ Recovery uranium projects in Wyoming. We've been working away for the last 2 or 3 seasons, and we're about to embark upon our latest round of drilling at our flagship Lo Herma project.
Good to see you, Bruce. The first time you've been on the show and talked about your projects, and thank you very much for joining us, especially uranium, very topical at the moment, and also Wyoming, very topical at the moment. But before we kind of get into, can you give us a little bit of background on you? Where have you come from? What have you done?
Yeah, look, I've spent the last 20 years working with junior resource companies for the most part, working on acquiring projects, funding them, and running a couple of ASX listed companies. I spent my first time with uranium was back prior to Fukushima with a project in South Korea in Daejeon, and then I've been involved in the Northern Territory and always had a very firm belief that uranium and nuclear power made a lot of sense from a first principles energy density point of view. And so I've been waiting for an opportunity to get back involved, and I think the time has obviously arrived.
That it has. We're seeing lots of new companies springing up, but mostly because it's sort of driven by the, I guess, commercial imperative that governments are seeing as well. But just before we do, when did you pick up this asset? And why the US? Why is that the best place to be with developing an asset?
Yeah, Matt, I along with some co-investors, we're looking at uranium back in 2018, and really, that thematic around energy transition and net zero had gathered a lot of steam, and it was pretty clear that right back then it was pretty clear that nuclear power was going to have its place in that future. And so we found some projects initially in Utah through some contacts from a previous life, and then we were always looking for in-situ recovery projects, and particularly in Wyoming. Then it eventually, through some other contacts and through our geological consultants, came across some great ideas around the Great Divide Basin, and then beyond that, once again through conversations and contacts, we found the Lo Herma project in the Powder River Basin. So those assets, exploration, uranium exploration, pretty much anywhere in the world, but particularly in the US, was deader than a doornail for a long time. And so no one was really interested in these projects, and we could see the potential of them, given the neighbourhood, right next to UR Energy that's back in production, just down the road from Rio's projects, Cameco, Energy Fuels, UEC. And so we moved on them. I guess the backdrop to all that, though, was just the knowledge that the US, being the largest nuclear power generator in the world and the largest buyer of uranium, wasn't producing any. And it wasn't just us, it was the Department of Commerce that could see the issue with that going forward. And they published a paper back in 2019 pointing out loud and clear that there was a strategic issue for the US. And that was before what had happened in Ukraine with Russia was even a consideration. So all of those factors played together for us to believe strongly it was the right thing to do at the right time in the right place.
Right. Okay. And you've got so you've got 3 assets in Wyoming, but Lo Herma is the flagship in all of this. So tell me a little bit more about the asset that you've picked up there. Is there historic data? Has there been any work done on it? Or are you starting from blank sheet of paper?
Yeah. Well, look, that was the attraction. There's been a mountain of work done on it back in the 70s and 80s. So we picked up a drill hole database with around 1,700 drill holes. And of those, we were able to stake what we thought was the best part of that, which allowed us to cover about 800 odd of those drill holes. And so from that, we actually had the paper logs. We were able to scan them, digitize them, and then pull them into a JORC 2012 database, so a modern database. So we were able to do that within a few months. And then since we did that, we've flown some geophysics over the ground and done the ground truthing and got the permitting, and we're about to drill.
Are you literally about to drill?
Yeah, so we declared a resource of 5.7 million pounds at an average grade of around 630 ppm, which we know is production grade in both the Powder River and the Great Divide Basin. That's perfectly viable for production. And from that, we were able to determine where we thought we might like to drill. And so that drilling, as I say, we're now permitted, bonded. We've got the driller lined up, and we just, it's just that final day that we're going to be on the ground. It could be this week, it could be next.
Okay, well, tell me about come back to the commercial bit. So 5.7 million pounds at average of 630 ppm. You gave a couple of examples of where it's perfectly commercial, I think you said. Tell me a little bit more about that. I just want to understand it in the context of other projects out there.
Yeah, look, if you look at the neighbouring projects in both the Great Divide and in the Powder River Basin, there's a range of grade being produced from, and that's around sort of the 400s up till some are as high as 1,000 or 1,100 or even slightly higher. So it's really a case of what the grade thickness is and what the porosity is of the projects, as long as the depth is appropriately far enough below the water table. So we know that the setting that we have, looks positive to be commercial. We've got work to do, obviously. It's only an inferred resource, but we've also got an exploration target there of an additional 10 million pounds if we hit the top end of that range. So we feel it's got the scale and the sort of a grade to be able to be a producing asset in the right conditions. I think there are, if you look at Shirley Basin, which is GTI Energy's project, I think it's 8.8 million pounds with 6.4 million pounds of recoverable uranium. They've got a slightly better grade there, I think. I'm not an expert on their project, but it's certainly of the ilk of a project that at that scale is developable.
Right. Okay. And just talk again for people who perhaps coming into uranium afresh, or certainly coming to your story afresh. The ISR component in Wyoming, we've seen a few. I think I know the answer here, but we've seen a few ISR company projects with companies with assets in Wyoming. ISR is clearly you've just had permits to drill. In terms of getting into production, do we see any sort of red flags coming down the line?
Nothing specific general in terms with ISR. In Wyoming, not all of the projects, most of them use an alkaline leach, and that's been permitted in Wyoming since the 70s and 80s. Now, recently, obviously, Peninsula switched the Lance project across to acid, and that was the first acid leach, I believe, that was low pH leach that was approved for ISR in Wyoming. So, we know there's a path through to permitting. I mean, it does take time for sure, and it does take the people and all those things, but there appears to be, a real support and a pathway through to permitting for these projects, which, whilst still onerous, is nowhere near impossible.
Right. Okay. And if I'm looking at the amount of companies that in Wyoming is obviously Caesar, Energy Fuels there. You've got Cameco even there, and yourselves, and I think recently Nuclear Fuels as well. The spin out from Encore. There's a lot of companies coming into Wyoming with I suspect an expectation that they will be able to get into production to feed into this US demand that you're talking about, the shortfall that you're talking about. What's your end game here? Is it just going to set yourself up for, because clearly it feels like a roll up would be most sensible in Wyoming rather than lots of small companies. And what's your end game?
Look, we're trying not to get too far ahead of ourselves. I think clearly we need to prove that there's an asset there of value, and that gives us our future. And look, I do agree that consolidation has already been taking place in the industry, and I don't see that changing going forward. I think there's the real possibility of further consolidation. I mean, there isn't a surplus of people who know how to do these things, and so the good teams should logically have the best assets to work with. So, I think it is an industry where companies do talk to each other and do work together to a certain extent. It's not always plain sailing, as Peninsula discovered with UEC, but but there is a track record of the industry working together, and these assets do lend themselves to that. So we know that if we were to work with, say, UR Energy, the fact that they're already licensed and permitted would accelerate the progress of, bringing those assets or our assets into commercial reality. So, we've got an open mind to that, obviously. But having said that, the path to development's not an impossible one. The capital for these projects is manageable. We think that, say $75 million or thereabouts may be a number that you can work with to get up £1 million a year project over 10 years. Now, those are obviously just spitballing numbers. We have done our homework, but we can't publish that homework in the public domain under the JORC rules. But, we have worked with it, and we are investing with the confidence that, that there's a commercial outcome potentially here.
Right. Okay. And so, well, let's get back to the drilling. You've got a resource, right? You know what the grades are. Why are you drilling? What are you drilling to find out?
I guess three core components. That one is that the database that we used, the drill logs are from back in the 70s and 80s. So whilst we are very confident with those drill logs and they're of high quality, we've got to verify those. And so we're doing some twinning to make sure that those holes do stack up to scrutiny. We strongly believe they will, but we've got to produce that information under the JORC rules. The other thing is we want to test some trends and at some depth for additional mineralization. So we've got plenty of roll fronts interpreted on the project to the north and the south, and they do curl around a bit. So, but we've also got a formation below us called the Fort Union Formation. Now, the historical drilling was down to only about 300 or 400 feet. So that's in the Wasatch, principally in the Wasatch Formation in Wyoming, which is also a very productive formation, took for our neighbours. But importantly, Cameco, about 10 miles to our east, is producing out of the Fort Union. And so we want to test the Fort Union. We know there's some mineralisation there because we've got some historical holes, but we really want to get stuck in and just see what's happening at depth, because that'll potentially make quite a big difference to the resource. So those are the key reasons we're drilling. And then, I think fundamentally we'll look to use that data to set ourselves up for the drilling campaign next year, probably the back end of next year if we get everything right, and hopefully we'd start to work towards a preliminary economic assessment.
Right. Okay. And obviously the market's quite good for uranium companies at the moment, and I think money seems reasonably okay to find. It's a question of what that costs you. I just think it's a really sort of interesting time to be a uranium explorer / developer at the moment. Can you kind of give us a sense of, with regards to the current drilling, how much you're spending on that? We know what the outcomes you're looking for is. Do you expect to go to market and then maybe sort of up the ambition, the scale of getting after this? Because timing the market seems to be the thing of the moment. ISR is, yes, it's cheaper. Yes, it's kind of quicker to production. And yes, it's the margins are good compared to that kind of hard rock stuff. Do you think you've got to try and work out how to time this? Are you kind of gauging the market, the sentiment at the moment in terms of the plan?
Yeah, look, I mean, we're always looking at the environment for investors and investing and for raising capital, for sure. We're a long way from cash flow in one sense. So we rely on raising money to fund our activities. And, we've been through a couple of these false summits with uranium, more than one over the years. We didn't just start doing this last week. So it is tricky sometimes to be raising money at the right time, and having, we need to show progress and to demonstrate that we can actually execute. So, that's what we're really focused on, is trying to get the best bang for our buck in terms of delivering outcomes and results. And, the great thing about having all the historical information is that allows you to make a lot of progress very, very quickly. And we think that, that data would have cost us something in the order of, 15 million bucks, maybe even slightly more, and taken, a few years to deliver. So, we look at our portfolio of projects and, we've got good projects in the Great Divide Basin. We've got quite an interesting project at Green Mountain. We'll have some geophysics out and be able to talk more about that soon. But they obviously require drilling. Whereas, Lo Herma, we've been able to look at a budget for drilling of, say, closer to $500,000 US rather than, say, $5 million US to bring our inferred resource up in confidence and hopefully extend it. Now, you always want to spend a bit more to see if you can deliver more pounds, and that's all. That's the challenge is how much to leave in the tin. And so what we're trying to do is be prudent about it and do it in a stepwise fashion, and so that we, depending on what's happening with the capital markets over the course of the next, 3, 6, 9, 12 months, we just have to keep a weather eye on where we're going, where we might end up if for some reason, we're not able to raise money as easily as we would hope.
Right. And do you think this historic data does you a favour? I think there's always a danger in spaces like this, and we saw it in the last cycle as well, where you have a lot of kind of people sort of jumping on the bandwagon and just going along for the ride. Don't have to do too much, don't have to know too much, but the market kind of sweeps you along because it's all the same stuff, right?
Yeah.
In terms of that historic data, does that help differentiate you? Does it help, I guess, your message that this is a real company and we are trying to really get into production and we're not just here for market sentiments? I mean, how do you compare yourself to some of the other new entrants? I know you've been at it a while, but effectively a new entrant.
Oh, look, I think I absolutely agree that it creates a point of difference, and it does give us, I guess, a legitimacy to some extent that we have that, that asset, the ground combined with the data and a story around it that satisfies the disclosure requirements, and it does. I mean, you do hear people saying, the pounds in the ground story doesn't get you very far, but it gets you further than moose pasture. So, we're not a developer at this point. We're not raising our capital to build the plant. We want to be where Peninsula is and where UR Energy is, or at least, proving up an asset that is attractive to those guys, whether it's an Encore or an Energy Fuels or a UEC. Our asset needs to stack up to scrutiny and be at least within their consideration if they were going to buy something. And that will tell us that it's worth developing. We have our own objective measure of that, but ultimately the market is the market, and we can think we've got the crown jewels, but it has to look attractive, in general terms. So that's, and we think that we have got a head start on that, a big head start. And with the uranium price where it is and, hopefully set to go higher, we think the conditions are great for the company.
I think they are too. Well, look, Bruce, appreciate you kind of coming in and sort of sharing that kind of overview with us. I wouldn't mind hearing from you when you start to understand what's coming back from the drilling, and if it does actually confirm the historic data, what you have seen through the historic data as well. So stay in touch.
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me on, Matt.